Foreign Objects was me trying to do a genre of music that was touched on very briefly in 1993, where all the death metal bands that started to sound the same, like generic death metal, a couple bands said, okay, let's stay a death metal band, but let's add some different elements. And a couple bands did some jazz, a couple bands experimented with orchestration and orchestral voices and operatic voices and stuff. That was Believer. Believer went orchestral and operatic. They had like a girl vocalist, but they used to be just a fast, violent death metal band. Cynic did this jazzy kind of thing, and they were a fusion band where neither one of the guitarists were ever really playing the same thing at the same time. And that's how they tried to expand. And then there was Atheist that kind of took a spiritual route, and jazz as well, and a little bit of Latin music in there too. And Pestilence, who was one of my favorite death metal bands already, did that album Spheres in 1993, in which they totally abandoned the Slayer beat, and they abandoned a lot of different things. And they got this really weird guitar sound with the Zoom 9010 processor. But on Spheres in 1993, the new thing was death metal is still cool, but when the bands experiment with all different kinds of music, because you can do that with metal. Lots of kinds of music you got to stay within a limitation. That's why I like this so much, because you could write aggressive stuff. But the point is that these bands all put out these four bands, Believer, Cynic, Atheist, and Pestilence, all put out these really cool genre-defying, boundary-slaying albums that all flopped. They lost all their hardcore death metal fans. But not me. I said, okay, these guys started this kind of music and they died from it. Their fans left. If I started sounding like that, maybe I could take it to another level and go with this genre of this like spacey science fiction, jazz, fusion things where there's two different riffs going at one time and they complement each other. And guitar synths where you could play leads, but it could sound like a violin or a trumpet or stuff. There's stuff on the Pestilence Spheres record where there's trumpet solos going on in the back, but it's a guitar synth doing it. It was a genre of music that never got a following. So, and I loved that idea. I loved the idea of getting a bunch of pedals and making my guitar sound mid-rangey and chorusy and like coming up with all these things. And I didn't know what they were using in the studio because the guitar sound is so weird and some people can't stand it, but I find it fascinating now. I didn't like it in the beginning, but it's a very mid-range, annoying guitar sound that sounds like space, like spacey science fiction. So I tried to take that genre and I made Foreign Objects out of that. And then from Foreign Objects, we decided to do something else. And then it turned into Oil. And then Oil was me trying to chase grunge trends because I'm like, I'm not getting anywhere with this boundary slaying death metal genre either. Everybody was saying, oh, it's so awesome, but it's too complicated and nobody likes this shit anymore. I was like, okay, so I decided to always keep Foreign Objects going anyway. And then Oil was my attempt at trying to get a record deal so I wouldn't have to go to college. And I was so caught up with what the industry was asking for and what record companies would not invest in, no matter how good you were at it. And I learned a lesson there that you can't pretend to be into something and get away with it. So we ditched the grunge thing with the Oil tapes. And that finally, I said to Jazz, let's forget all kinds of music other than our root being rock. We'll be a rock band, but we won't sound like any other rock bands. And I still had all my effects and my pedals from doing Foreign Objects. And I decided I like single note songs, never been done. It could sound new and fresh. And the octave pedal helped make a single note sound bigger than just bang, bang, bang. Like it was like, it made it really thick and heavy. So I didn't want to be playing chords all the time. And I figured I could get more melody out of riffs than chords, because when you have riffs, you can either be busy and melodic with the vocals, or you can just have a riff. And that's this kind of shit that carries the song 96 Bitter Beings. Like, like, that's the part of the song everybody remembers. It doesn't even have a chorus. It doesn't even have a vocal line that it's just the riff. So we lucked out in that sense.